jump back in. We're going to be finishing out, I hope, the kind of introduction to the book of Proverbs. I think Heidi cleaned over there. We're going to be finishing out the introduction, as it's considered to be, of the book of Proverbs through chapter 9. We got about halfway through chapter 8 last week, and we kind of come to a stopping point around verse 22, I believe. So if we back up a little bit and kind of gear back into that, what we're reading, verses 12 and forward, is wisdom speaking basically in the first person perspective of I will do this and my and me, and it begins to really speak some eye-opening things for me, starting verse 22. Let's back up to 12 and kind of read down through, and when we hit verse 23, I want you to really put in context, this is wisdom speaking, and wisdom is speaking in perspective of her, uses the female gender when wisdom refers to itself. Her relationship, will say, with God himself, all the way back to the beginning of creation. It's really mind-blowing, I think, just to read the perspective that wisdom is speaking here. So it says in verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. Prudence means really, really thinking things through. Verse 13, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way. And the froward mouth do I hate. Again, wisdom is speaking here. Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. By me, kings reign, and princes decree justice. By me, princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love them that love me. Powerful statement to think about. Wisdom loves us back. That's interesting to think about, if we love wisdom. And those that seek me early shall find me. Riches and honor are with me, yea, durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. It's already been mentioned this earlier in the book, that wisdom itself is far better than anything you can gain from material wealth. The wisdom is far better than that. It says that again here. I lead in the way of righteousness, verse 20 says, in the midst of the paths of judgment. Here we start to get to that transition point, heading to verse 22. Verse 21 says, that I may cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will find their treasures. Verse 22, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, for his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. I mean, this is flat out saying that wisdom itself is eternal. It's of the very nature of God. Now, why do you think that is?
God is wisdom.
Because wisdom comes from God, exactly. I mean, this goes hand in hand. That's just a pretty powerful thought, that we can tap into something that is the nature of God and it's called wisdom. Of course, we also have the Holy Spirit today that they didn't have when this book was written. They did not have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit existed as part of the triune being of God, but it was an external force that acted upon people, not acted within people, which now we have the Holy Spirit inside of us. So we have both two forms of God that can reside in us, the Holy Spirit and wisdom. That's pretty awesome to think about. Verse 24 says, when there were no depths, I was brought forth. Again, wisdom speaking. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. And if you think about that, within nature itself, we see wisdom demonstrated. Just the way things work in nature. Yeah, a lot of people go the atheistic route and evolution route. And one of my big questions has always been, can you not see the design that plant life gives us life? We live off of oxygen. If the plants didn't exist, we couldn't exist. Which bears the question of how did the amoeba, as they claim, exist without oxygen in the ocean if plant life hadn't developed billions and billions of years ago, And my big question of that is, why would, if we started off in the ocean, even have known that we needed to develop lungs to breathe in an atmosphere that we weren't even a part of? Because the whole point of evolution, from what I understand, is you're adapting to your environment. Well, if we always lived in the water, why do we develop lungs to live in an environment we weren't already in? We wouldn't have adapted to the environment. And even so, if it took millions and millions of years to develop lungs, how could you breathe under the water if you had lungs? And how could you breathe out of the water if you didn't have lungs? And you wouldn't have existed for millions of years during that transition period. And on top of that, there are no missing link transitional fossils that's ever been found. And the ones that have been found have been proven to be hoaxes. There's only a handful. But anyway, just the way that all that works, plant life lives off of what? Carbon dioxide that we breathe out. We live off of the oxygen that it breathes out or gives off. That within itself is design. That is wise. That is wisdom.
That's weird.
And we breathe
Built
out
in-
carbon
Yeah,
dioxide.
we breathe out the carbon dioxide that it needs. It breathes out it's perfect design, only given to us by God through the wisdom of His own nature. So, all that just shoots holes all in the evolutionary theory, but people ignore that, evidently.
You know what? When those people stand before God
Right.
and they're gonna give all their reasons and all this stuff, if He allows it.
If He permits that, yeah.
And He's gonna sit there and say, you idiots, I gave you proof
Yeah.
every second of every day of creation.
Absolutely.
And you still didn't get it.
It's like I said, I sent the boat, but you didn't get in.
Yeah, I was at the boat and you didn't get in. That's exactly right. Well, yeah, we went through the book of Romans, and it says there in Romans 1 that nature itself declares the Godhead of the Trinity, that that they are without excuse. I mean, nature itself declares there's a creator. I mean, it's just there. And this is really speaking of that. It says, before even the mountains settled, I was brought forth, while as yet He had not made the earth. Interesting that wisdom refers to God here as a He, right? Wisdom is personifying itself earlier as a she. While as yet He had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. She was brought forth before that even happened. That's just really profound to think about. When He prepared the heavens, speaking of God, I was there. And just let that settle in a minute. I mean, wisdom is like, before God, before He did all this, I was already there. That's just pretty crazy to think about, that wisdom was already there. And when He set a compass upon the face of the depth, what's a compass do?
Gives you direction.
Gives you direction. North, south, east, west. What does a drawing compass do?
What's your job, sir?
Draws a circle. That's how we know the earth is a circle. Biblically, there's no flat earth out there. A lot of people still believe in that sort of thing, but and there's other places that speak of the circle of the earth. But anyway, he says that, verse 27 is where we're at. When He set a compass upon the face of the depth, when He established the clouds above, when He strengthened the fountains of the deep, when He gave to the sea His decree, that the waters should not pass His commandment, when He appointed the foundations of the earth. What is that talking about? The waters should not pass His commandment when He appointed the foundations of the earth.
The waters could have encircled the entire earth.
Okay?
I guess.
The water was somewhat withheld from engulfing the entire planet.
Have land areas.
Had land areas, the land mass that was there. Also, where did, this is weird to think about, but where did all that water come from during the Great Flood? We always think it,
The earth,
right, we think of it rained, which it did. It came
Yeah.
from the sky, but it also says that the fountains of the deep brought forth water. So there was water within the earth that broke loose. This is a verse referring to that he withheld the boundaries of that water until it was time to judge the planet. Then he allowed that to brought forth, and then it all receded. We don't know if it receded back into the earth, or maybe it all evaporated. I have no idea how that worked. I just know God accomplished it. But this is interesting that this is referring to that. He appointed the foundations of the earth. Verse 30, then I was by him as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. It sounds like there that wisdom was worshiping God, and wisdom was a part of God. They're with God. This is crazy to read this and to really understand the context of what wisdom is saying here. Rejoicing in the habitable part of his earth, and my delights were with the sons of men, trickling on into creation. That's speaking of us. Now therefore, hearken unto me, O ye children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. This is wisdom again speaking. Hear instruction, and be wise, and refuse it not. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the post of my doors. If you go back to Proverbs 7, it spoke of another type of woman who was lurking at her window, waiting for the next suitor to come along that she would take advantage of. Wisdom is saying, don't go that direction, go my direction. That's where it started in chapter 8. And she's kind of concluding this thought that, listen to me, wait at the, it says, blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates. Not at the promiscuous woman's gates, but at the wisdom's gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whosoever findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me, interesting to think we can sin against wisdom, which we do that all the time when we make foolish decisions. We're sinning against wisdom, which is the essence of God.
Mine says, but to those who fail to find me harm themselves.
Yep. And this says, he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. That's a pretty powerful statement. So that's a whole just interesting take on wisdom herself, I guess we could say, in the context, and how she was part of God, was there with God, was worshiping God, was there before creation, a part of creation itself. Some pretty cool stuff. Well, you got any thoughts or think about any of that in chapter 8 before we get into chapter 9?
It's pretty deep in the way he presents it is kind of a review that sort of makes it a little easy to understand. From verse 34, I guess, it's talking about making daily decisions, using discernment about
Exactly.
what you do. You make a decision every day. Okay, is this the right thing to do? You don't just willy-nilly do stupid stuff.
Exactly.
And I know people, lots of friends that have destroyed their lives
Absolutely.
doing stupid things. Drinking and smoking and, making
Running
decisions
around.
about
Yeah,
sex
absolutely.
and on it goes.
And that ties back to verse 12 where it says, I wisdom dwell with prudence. And prudence is that thinking things through. What is this going to do if I make this decision today? How is that going to affect me 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, 2 generations from now? People don't think like that. That's because they're not very wise, right?
Here, hold my beer, watch.
Right. Watch this. Famous last words of a redneck. Watch this. All right, let's get into chapter 9. I think we got time to get through it. It's got some pretty profound stuff. It's only 18 verses as well. So we should get through this next little bit. So here the conversation kind of shifts and begins to give some general, really great advice to people to think about as we're interacting with others around us, as we make decisions in our lives moving forward. Chapter 9, verse 1 says, "Wisdom has builded her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars." For 7 is the perfect number of God. This is just giving us the imagery of wisdom is wealth. I guess we could take a person who is very successful. It is something that is beyond what most people, ordinary people, may have, but that we can have. You know, we can have this kind of wisdom, and she's simply portrayed here as a big house with 7 pillars. You know, we see these big mansions, and we're like, "Ooh, oh, this is amazing." Wisdom is saying, "This is me. I can give you this kind of life, at least mentally and spiritually, of course, through God." He's saying this is a higher level to attain if you want to attain wisdom. "She hath killed her beasts. She hath mingled her wine. She hath also furnished her table." Basically, this is, I have prepared a banquet for you to feast on if you'll just come to me and take advantage of wisdom and make good decisions. Your life is going to be better. We read over and over again to be wise and live long, to have a prosperous life, to have a long life, to have a peaceful life. That's what's going to come to us if we seek and live with and fall in love with wisdom and let that be part of our life. "She has sent forth her maidens. She hath cried upon the high places of the city." That's her. She's got this big mansion. I mean, we can really assimilate this to God. And, you know, "I go prepare a place for you. You know, my house are many mansions." We read that in King James Version. Wisdom has prepared this place for us to dwell, and a banquet for us to enjoy. And she has sent out messengers saying, "Come on, I'm welcoming all those who want to come to me." This is exactly how God works. It's exactly how salvation works. I mean, this is all tied together. It's pretty amazing to read about. "Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither." I mean, and this is not like to the elite. She's like, anybody, you simpleton over there, come here, be a part of this. I want you to come in and to be a part of what I'm offering here. It says, "Turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine which I have mingled." We read earlier, I think it was in chapter 7, that a man who wastes himself on foolish women basically is like just eating up a piece of bread. Here's the contrast. Again, that's what Proverbs is a contrast. "Eat of my bread," she's saying. Don't waste your time on all that other stuff, that old moldy, nasty thing. You know, "Come eat of my bread, drink of the wine that I have mingled. Forsake the foolish and live." Again, there's that terminology. I mean, go to the way of understanding. These next few verses really hit me kind of weird in a good way. It's pretty profound. It says, "He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot." What do you make of that?
My Bible has a little different translation. It says, whoever corrects a mocker invites insult. And you got some guys on the street and say, what are you doing, knucklehead? He's going to get up. You're going to get it back.
Okay.
And then for the other part, it says, whoever rebukes a wicked man incurs abuse. In other words, if you call them out, they're going to come after you. The mocker,
Sure, absolutely.
or the abuser.
And here's another perspective to think of. This in my head went straight to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. Because basically, and Jesus taught of this same thing as well. Let's read it again. He that reproveth a scorner getteth him to himself shame. He that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Jesus said, cast not your pearls to the swine, lest they just take them and turn and rend you again. Don't waste your time on things that are not going to be worth the time. If you read 2 Corinthians 2:14, it says, but the natural man, that's an unbeliever, receiveth not but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. I mean, how many hours have you wasted? I've wasted many, trying to talk to an unbeliever about something that only a believer can really understand. That's kind of what this is talking about. Don't go around trying to, expound your knowledge and wisdom upon someone who doesn't even have the ability. That's what this verse says, that neither can a natural man know the things of the Spirit of God. It says neither can he know them, because they're spiritually discerned. There are some things that you can't really understand until you have the Holy Spirit of God in you to explain it to you. And oftentimes we waste a lot of time trying to get through to people things that can only really be accepted through faith. And of course, that's what they use against us. Well, you're just, accepting things on blind faith. Well, so are they with the concept of the Big Bang Theory, that everything came from nothing, and that nothing was the driving force that created all things, that had perfect order, perfect design. Unintelligence created extreme intelligence. I mean, they're blindly believing that because there's literally no evidence that any of that actually occurred.
I have a granddaughter like that.
Right.
And I never try to, and she is, her intelligence is in the genius level.
Right.
And she knows, without a doubt, that she knows everything.
Right.
Without her doubt.
That's the way most atheists are.
And I used to, when she was younger, I used to try verbally to change her mind.
Right.
And then God said, it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
There's this thing called prayer.
Holy Spirit's going to do that.
Well, a couple of weeks, about 10 days ago, she was over at the house and she was on her soapbox about religion.
Right.
And so, and right now she's decided that she's going with it, the thing that she's going to come back as something else.
Reincarnation.
Yeah. And I said, Taylor, what happens if you come back as a roach?
Right.
And so, and I kind of meant it as a, well, I meant it as putting her down.
Right.
Bring her around. She had an answer for it.
I'm sure
and
she
I
did.
thought, okay, Lord, I hear you. And so, I live my life, try to live my life for God in front of her.
Right. That's the best
And when
way.
it's my birthday or it's Christmas, she gives me something religious
Hmm.
to do with God. But for her, so she's getting it,
Right.
and and except for that time in years, I've prayed for and tried to live my life as God would have me live it before her.
Right.
And that's all I can do.
Sometimes that is all you can do.
And it's really bothered me all these years, that she's...
But that is part of training, demonstrating how you ought to be, and that's part of, what is that? Proverbs 22, somewhere in there, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old enough to depart from it.
Well, God's
That's part of that
taken
training process.
He's taken that, that thing in me that is just breaking my heart, has broken my heart, because I know that if she doesn't get it,
Right.
she doesn't have much longer. And, but he's made me understand, especially with the roach thing, that there's not a thing I can do
Right,
to save her,
exactly.
except what he's already told me
Just
to
lead
do.
her to him and let him do the
And I
saving.
do, and I'm feeling much better about me,
Right.
you know, and I still hurt for her.
Sure.
I
absolutely.
still I love her, and I want her to, I want her to work as hard for God,
Right,
and she's working against God.
right, for herself, yeah.
But that's all I can do.
That's all you can do. And that's exactly the context of this verse is, if you reprove a scorner, he goes in to say in verse 8, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate you. And that's the worst thing you can do, is beat somebody over the head with the Bible long enough and they just hate what you're doing and what you're saying, and then you turn them completely against God. It says, if you reprove a scorner, they're going to hate you. If you rebuke, I can't say it, rebuke a wise man, he will love you. And that's kind of the distinguishing difference in someone who's truly in a good place with God and who's not, is when you correct them and they respond favorably towards your correction, you know they've got the discernment and the wisdom of God deep inside of them, and they're not going to respond negatively. It says, give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet the wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord, here we go back to Proverbs 1, verse 7. It says there, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Here it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It is the beginning of both. The fear of the Lord, and atheists don't have that fear. They're rebukers, they're scorners, they're mockers. And until they get the fear of the Lord in them, they're not going to have this understanding. They're not going to have this knowledge and this wisdom. And the knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me, go back to wisdom speaking here, by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. How many more times is he going to say it before we understand that? If we want to live a long, prosperous life, we need to live wisely. We need to live a godly life. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself. If thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. It's going to be more beneficial to more people if you live in wisdom than if you just live alone, sour, bitter person. A foolish woman, here we go back to the woman example. A foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knoweth nothing. That's pretty blunt. For she sitteth at the door of her house on a seat in the high places of the city. This goes back to Proverbs 7. Speaking of that woman that's lurking by her window and her door, seeking for her next, suitor, to call passengers who go right on their ways. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. And as for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him. So this is the Proverbs 7 woman speaking to these men. Whoso is simple, let him turn to me, is what the Proverbs 7 woman, the bad woman, is saying. And as for him that wants understanding, she says to him, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eateth in secret is pleasant. She's saying, go the more exciting route, the behind the scenes route, the in the shadows kind of living. That's going to be more exciting, that's sweet, that's pleasant. Verse 18 tells the end of the story, though. It says, but he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell, or the grave, probably most translations say. So a lot of stark warnings, a lot of great advice, a lot of wisdom being bestowed up through chapter 9. Thoughts, reflections, anything that you want to ask or talk about as we close out this introductory part of the book?
Going back to verse 7, me and Evan kind of talked about this yesterday. We have a family member who is trying to convert to being a transgender person,
Right.
we think. And another of our family members kind of nags at the family member who's wanting to make that
Yeah.
decision, and that can make that
Pushes them farther
pensioner
into that
person can
decision.
push them further into
Yeah.
that because they're looking at, oh, well, this family member who's scolding me for my decision is like saying they're a Christian, but they're treating me this way, so it's making them want to turn further away.
I had a similar, well, not exactly that, but a somewhat similar example at work. There's a girl who is taking classes at Liberty University who's not a believer, but she's just trying to get her degree and it happened to work out for her. She's having to take these classes. Well, she's got into a bad habit of using Ch8-9 to do all of her papers for her, and she got busted for it. And the instructor was like, "You've got 24 hours to explain yourself." And that's basically all the instructor said. And so she comes ranting to me, "Well, this guy's supposedly a Christian, and he's going to sit here and say all this stuff about me." And I told her, I'm like, "Well, you did just use Ch8-9 to come up with it, right?" "Well, yeah, but everybody does that." And it started turning into, well, everybody sins, everybody's this. And it just pushed her more into her own fuel of rage against Christians who act like that, exactly what you're saying. And that's the risk. That's what it's really saying is, don't do that because it's not ever going to end well. It's just going to push them farther away. That's why it says, verse 8, to follow verse 7, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate you. And the more we push religion down people's throats, the more they're going to hate it. And that's why that's not a good strategy. I mean, you're
That's why,
exactly
like
right.
She said, just live your life
Yeah,
as peacefully for Christ as possible, so they see, wow, they're a very peaceful person. They must really be, what are they doing that's different than what I'm doing?
Right.
And they might.
because most people do these sorts of things to get attention. And when we give them negative attention, they're like, "Yeah, we're on something now," and they get enjoyment out of seeing you upset.
That's
So they
right.
keep on going at it because they want to see more of a show from you.
Because you're proving
Their
Their
suspicion,
point.
exactly. And that's not exercising wisdom. So that's a great way to kind of close this out and think about exercising prudence, wisdom, true understanding, knowledge. Anybody else got any other thoughts?
Yeah, there's one thing, it works the opposite way for someone who's wise. If you let them know, if they use the word rebuke, if you let them know, well, this is not, what you're
Right.
doing is not right, he'll learn from that. And
Absolutely.
he'll accept it, and thank you for.
And become all the better for it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
so that's kind of the opposite, so.
Yeah, I love that in verse 9 and moving forward, it says exactly what you're saying is, people who are truly wise will listen to criticism in a positive way. All right, we'll close this out online. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later.